This week's episode of the Salt and Sauce Chat Show is sponsored by North Broad Street Records, bringing you the very best in unissued music. North Broad Street Records discovers and brings to vinyl cool, unfinished gems. For more information, please visit www.northbroadst.co.uk. Coming up on this week's Salt and Sauce Chat Show.
I don't know what kind of lassie that Alice is, but she sounds really rough. Our Billy can do better than that.
Superb, mate.
Well, sitting in the stand under his wee umbrella is Mesut Ozil on 350 grand a week, not getting a game, not even threatening to get on the bench. Guys say, well, you're a kind of well-known guy and you're saying that you've got this thing. Does that mean it's okay for me to say I've got this? Of course it is. So that's, for me, that's a lot more helpful to the world than
Absolutely
criticising footballers.
Welcome along to another episode of the Salt and Sauce Chat Show. I'm David Simmonds, and on this week's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Scottish sports writer, author and broadcaster, also mental health therapist, Bill Leckie.
How are you doing?
Not bad, Bill. Thanks for coming to the show, mate. We do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. So it's almost 40 years now you've been involved in the newspaper industry. Take us back. Where did this all begin?
Don't start. Well, it actually starts. My first job was in the Clydebank Press. Now, like many papers I've worked for, it's now shut. I don't know if it's a coincidence or what. July 1981, the week that Charles and Di got married, I started work. But I actually had my first byline in the paper when I was 8.
8 years old?
So I started. I went to, me and my dad went to see St Mirren home and away. So I'm down one day at the gate, getting in at Love Street. And at the gate next to me, I see my headmaster, a guy called Sam McDougall, great old guy, primary school headmaster. So he's going, and I looked up and it press and complimentaries. I thought, I wonder if somebody gets him free tickets. So we went in through the gates and I said to my dad, my headmaster, Mr. McDougall, I said, oh, hello, how are you doing, son? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, what do you think today? So we just chatted with him again. So on the Monday morning at school, he sees me, he says, how did you enjoy the game? I says, oh, well, rubbish. And I says, were you there? What were you doing in that? Is that gate's different? He went, well, actually, I worked for one of the local papers at the weekend, and it was the Paisley Pictorial, this old weekly paper. And he says, I don't write under my name, but I cover the games. And I went home and I thought about this. I said to my dad, I says, Dad, Mr. McDougall does this for the paper. And he said, I says, that means if you do that, you get in to see St Mirren for nothing. And I went, that's what I fancy doing that. So he spoke to me a while later about, I was doing well at English and stuff, and I told him I was quite interested in newspapers. So the next thing, he spoke to the paper, and they got me in to do this wee feature. So I went along with him to a game, and he wrote the match report, and I wrote this wee bit off down the side. That was it. I saw my name in the paper next to a St Mirren match report, and
40 years later, you're still
we're
doing
off and running. So that was when I was 8. So that was 1971. And it was 1981 then I started work at Clydebank. So it'll be 41, probably around about the next time fans get into football.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, mate. Is there a certain story you've covered over the years that really sticks out for you? Any articles you've wrote and you thought, oh, wow.
Well, I've been really lucky. I've done loads of stuff. And I suppose that the in terms of scale, the biggest thing I've ever covered would be the 10th anniversary of 9/11. I got sent over by the Sun to do the memorial services over there, and I spent about a week in New York doing that, and that was just mind-blowing, the scale of that whole thing, and for anybody that's been across to the 9/11 memorial and all that, and that for me was just to be there writing about that was great. I mean, I'm so lucky over the years that I've covered like 6 World Cup finals and European championships, 7 European championships and stuff, so whenever you go, you get a chance to go to, so when it's like South Africa 2010, I went to Nelson Mandela's cell in Robben Island, and in Japan 2002, I went to Hiroshima and all that kind of stuff. But then at the other end of the scale, there's things that happen that you'll just never forget that are so, you couldn't make them up. So I'm at Clydebank in the early 80s. Now my editor was a guy called Colin Tuff, whose brother was a guy in the Crankies.
Oh, right, okay.
Right, so Colin was right into showbiz and all that stuff. And I said to him, hey, why don't we do pop music stuff in the paper? And he went, all right, son, if you can make it happen. So you would get all these press releases in saying such and such are coming. If you want to know anything, phone, blah. So I fixed up a couple of interviews. Hugh Cornwall from the Stranglers had just come out of prison. They just brought out Golden Brown.
Right.
did an interview with him, Spandau Ballet. Now, these people don't know they're talking to the Clydebank Press. Right? They just know they're talking to... They're doing 1 million papers today, and this is one of them. But then I fixed up to do this thing with Alice Cooper, right? For anybody that doesn't remember, Alice Cooper was the guy who snaked big python around his neck and the black eyes. He was the Marilyn Manson of his day in the sort of early 70s. Yeah. So he was a proper freak. Now he plays golf with Bill Clinton and stuff like that. Wow. Talk change. Anyway, so Clydebank Press, Alice Cooper, phone up his record company, any chance of doing a piece with, he's coming to Glasgow. He says, yeah. He says, it'll be available on Sunday. It'll be in California. So over there it'll be kind of midday. So I'm saying 10 o'clock, yeah, that's fine. Now, I don't drive at the time, so I thought I'm not going into the office 10 o'clock on Sunday night. So I gave them my home number, which is my mum and dad's number. Yep. So I said, listen, phone's going to go about 10 o'clock tonight. It's a thing for me for the paper. And I said to my mum, it's Alice Cooper. Now, my sister was in the house at the time. I'd come up for Sunday dinner. So my dad was at his work. So he worked in a paper mill down the road for us in Paisley, and he's at his work. And my sister's, Alice Cooper. Oh, God, Alice Cooper. I need to stay and listen to Alice Cooper. So, anyway, long story short, gets to 10 o'clock, phone doesn't ring. Alice Cooper, that's fine. So my sister eventually says, I need to go down the road. So she's away. My mum says, I'm still sitting up next to the phone. 11 o'clock, nothing. Dad comes in for his work. Late Sunday night, comes in. Are you still up for something? I says, I was meant to be doing a work thing, Dad, but anyway, I'm going to my bed. So I go to my bed. So my dad does his usual, falls asleep in the chair. Next thing, the phone rings. So my dad answers the phone. Hello? Hey, what? All right, you want to speak to her, Billy? Right, so he shouts upstairs, hey, it's phone for you. And I come down the stairs, and he's glaring at me. So I was on the phone. I said, hello, hi, it's Alice Cooper here. How you doing? Wow. So we do the interview. Alice, wow, fantastic. And, Glasgow, the old Apollo Theatre, Greens Playhouse, and my favourite ever gig, 1972, told us all about that. Oh, it's great, thanks very much. Come off the phone. So I go to my bed. I got up in the mornings, make my breakfast. He says, Dad was still in his bed. He says, what was the matter with Dad last night? He says, that phone call you got. He says, what? He says, he said to me when he came back to bed, he goes, I don't know what kind of lassie that Alice is. But she sounds really rough. Our Billy can do better than that.
Superb, mate.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Wow, the Alice Cooper phone
Yeah,
news.
Alice Cooper news, phone my mother.
Brilliant. What about sort of press conferences? Have you been involved in many of them over the years? Or?
I used to all the time have to do the press conference. I mean, when you go away to tournaments around the world, you're doing it all the time.
It's a mics in kind of thing, is it?
Yeah, and when you go to the World Cup and European Championships, you've got the translate. It's like watching the stuff in Brussels now. You've got the earphones in for the simultaneous translation, and then you try and throw a question in. But I don't have to do a lot of it domestically now because it's not really my gig with the paper. Yep. But in the days when I did, it used to be great fun. The Maurice Johnson signing for Rangers press conference was just one of the biggest bun fights in the history of the world. That was incredible that day. I'd been involved in the story the day before when the Sun got the exclusive, and one of the last great exclusives in Scottish newspaper in football, I think. And we did that. And the next day that was mental. But the one that always sticks out, which I'll never understand why he did that, was when Kenny Dalglish came to Celtic, and it wasn't going fantastically well for him. It was coming towards the end. I think it was just after they lost to Cally Thistle, and John Barnes had gone, so Kenny was in charge. And Kenny was my absolute idol. My son's named after Kenny. Moaning face bastard, his name is. no, Kenny. So my son Kenny. So he was named after Kenny, and he came to Celtic. I thought it's going to be great, and it wasn't great because you meet your heroes sometimes, and he was not having a great time, and we were having to ask him some rubbish questions. So anyway, turn up. They're playing Rangers at Ibrox on the Sunday, and it's going really badly for them. And we turn up to Parkhead for the press conference, and the press officer says, actually, there's going to be a slight change of plan. We're not having it at the park today. So he says, we're having it in Baird's Bar, which is next door to the Barrowland.
Right.
Massive Celtic pub, just down the road from Parkhead. And Kenny's to say he's going to have it there so the fans can hear what the press are asking. Okay. So that day was just, it was really tense. There's a lot of beers. It's Friday lunchtime. There's a lot of real beers in this pub. You're that guy for the Sun. You're that guy for the Record. And it was a bit.
Do you think that was his genuine intent for the fans, or was it more a?
It was his intent, I think, to intimidate the press a little bit and just to get the fans on side. But of course, for anybody that remembers that, there'll be anoraks out there who do remember this. They went on the Sunday and lost 4-0 at Ibrox. Right. So what does every paper in the country call them? A pub team. Right. So he walked into it. So, but then he also did another one soon after where he took the press down to the Celtic Supporters Club along the road from the other way from Parkhead. And again, we didn't understand why this was happening. And we all turned up at the Celtic Supporters Club to go in. And Hugh Keevans, who was doing it for the Sunday Mail, was refused entry by the security guy in the door. Don't let Hugh Keevans in. Which again backfired, because he then goes back and writes this big story saying that DI was barred by Celtic for being me. And so those I was thinking at the time, what happens at a football club that they get so messed up in their own head about results that they start trying to do that to the press, because it was never going to do anything but backfire, especially on somebody as a fantastic a guy as Kenny. I was so disappointed in all that stuff.
Never meet your heroes, like you say, mate.
Absolutely, I think so.
So you've touched on Kenny Dalglish, Alice Cooper. Was there a story with Clint Eastwood as well, mate?
Oh yeah. I've mentioned this before, didn't I? Edinburgh Festival in must be 1990. It must be 1990 because the Scottish Sun had brought out these car stickers for Scotland going to
Italian night,
the World Cup in Italian night. So it was like Scotia, Italian 90 car sticker given away with the paper. So Edinburgh Festival, Clint Eastwood is coming. I can't remember. Would it be The Unforgiven? He's coming to do a big thing. But for some reason, when we got there, me and Mark Sweeney, the photographer, we get turned away from the press conference because somebody in the Sun down south had written a piece slaughtering this movie. And so we were told, you're not getting in. So I think, no, need to get an interview with Clint Eastwood, need to get it. So we asked, where's he staying? He's staying down at the Caledonian Hotel. So we go down there and wait for him coming back. No, you're not getting in here, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, eventually somebody in the hotel, I can't even remember what the story was, but somebody in the hotel told us that he'd been a bit snappy with somebody. He'd given some food back at the restaurant, didn't like it, sort of, he wanted his own bit of the restaurant roped off and all that stuff. Might be true, might not be true. But anyway, we went right away. I says, there's a story. The headline in this story is Shirty Harry. Eastwood gets big time with the hotel staff. And I thought, at least that's going to give us a story. So we Mark Sweeney, photographer, that says, much better idea as well. Let's find out where his limo is. I've got an idea. So we find out his driver's down this. He's got this burgundy Daimler. He's driving about in British driver down the side of the Cali Hotel. And we go down and Mark says, I'll keep an eye out back in a minute. So I'm at the end of the thing watching. And Mark does something. I don't know what. Right. So next thing, Mark comes round and goes, guys, Clint's round here. So all the photographers run round to get pictures of Clint's car. And Mark has covered the back of it in Sun World Cup stickers.
Oh, brilliant.
So everybody's photograph of Clint Eastwood's car is just covered in Sun stickers.
What a genius.
And I thought, these days you couldn't do stuff like that these days. It would all rebound on you. It would all, because if the guy for the Record had thought of it, he'd have done it to us.
Yep.
And he'd have went, And we used to do stuff like that, and I miss
those kind of things.
I miss the fun of that now because I think newspapers have changed.
Aye. I was just going to come on to that as my next question. I mean, how has sort of technology sort of developed? How's that impacted newspaper sales and the industry itself?
Well, newspaper sales are gradually dropping off. Right. Not as spectacularly, dramatically as
you might think
people say, but they just year on year, because it's like everything else on TV. The Morecambe and Wise show would get 15 million people. If Morecambe and Wise show's on now, it might get 3 million people because there's 1 million channels.
Yep.
So at any one time, somebody might be recording it to watch later, but they're not watching it at the time. So people are getting their news in different ways. We all know that, and newspapers are probably the older generation more likely to read them now than younger generation, which is cool. But technology changes things, because when I was so about 88, 89 maybe, when the first lot of new technology, the original computer screens that were coming in, that now you couldn't run a very small video game on, right? But at the time it was meant to turn out a national newspaper. And a lot of the older guys who were working on the Record and the Sunday Mail, where I was working at the time, just went, no, that'll do me. I'll take my redundancy, thanks, because I don't want to learn all this. So that was a great chance for young people to come in. And the same thing has happened with all the online stuff now, because every paper's got an online version of itself, or certainly an online portal for news, as opposed to an online version of, a different style. Like, we've got an app at the Sun where you can get the paper that's printed, but on in an online version. That's fine. Daily Mail do the same thing. But the actual online content, a lot of it's done by a lot of younger journalists. And I think just because of finances, etc., I don't think, for me, I don't see them getting the same level of on-the-job training as we did when we were.
Not so much nitty-gritty with a notepad and pen, do you mean?
I mean, when I was a young boy at Clydebank, and I moved from Clydebank over to Paisley and worked in Govan and Renfrew, fairly sort of hard-nosed areas. And, some poor soul would get killed in a car crash, and whatever it was, or some terrible fire or something, and you'd get sent to the door to talk to the grieving widow or widower or whatever, and ask nicely for a photograph and try and 9 times out of 10 they'd be really nice to you. 1 time out of 10 you get chased up the street. But you would chap the door and you would make a relationship, and you would say, look, that's a beautiful picture, would be any chance, and you'd get it and you'd write a piece, and they'd go and you'd take the picture back and they'd say, look, that was a really nice thing you did, son. Now the same thing happens on the online side anyway. I think a lot of young kids are getting used to interviewing Facebook. So you'll go onto the Facebook page and you've got all the comments,
it's just a copy and paste of what a friend had maybe wrote about them or something.
Which is, for me, it's not the way I learned, but then maybe the way I learned, I don't know whether it did me good or it did me no good. I don't know.
40 years down the line, mate, you're still
40 years, but I don't know whether it made the newspaper any better. The fact that, because people who buy the paper don't know the process that goes into making the paper. They just see what's in. Right. If I go and cover a football match, people don't know that, if it's like the other night, Serbia, Scotland, right, when we qualified back then, right? The game finishes it's 7:45, so it's 9:30, should be finished. Extra time takes you past 10 o'clock, so already our deadlines are getting pushed back. Penalty kicks is going to take to 10:30. I think the game probably finished about 20 to 11 in the end by the time David Marshall realised that we had won. And you're sitting all night like Rick Wakeman with about 19 screens with, trying to write different versions of what's going to happen. And at the end, you get this pressure to turn this out in about 10 minutes, turn it round and get out there. But people buy the paper and if I've got something wrong or whatever, they just go, he's a half-wit, right? They don't think, that guy was under huge. They don't care. So whether people know the difference between a story where I've gone out and chapped somebody's door and convinced a woman that I'm a nice person and she's made me a cup of tea and I've asked nicely for a picture, or whether I've interviewed Facebook, I'm not sure whether people really notice the difference. But I notice the difference. Yeah,
that's it. So you touched on, obviously, the Scotland game the other night against Serbia. 22 years since we've been to a major finals. You mentioned that you've been to South Africa and World Cup finals you've covered. It's long overdue for us, isn't it, mate?
It is, and from our point of view in newspapers, I'm so happy for a lot of the guys that I work with who must be bored out of their skull listening to me telling them how good it is to be at the finals. I feel there was guys who I work with, and a lot of players that you know as well, who just thought they were never going to get there, never going to be there, and now suddenly they're going, I'm going to cover Scotland. Now, okay, it's in Scotland and in England, so it's not as if you're going to the other side of the world, but it's going to be so good. It's so good for everybody. You can just see the feeling that people are getting, and it's. I think we've really needed it, because it's been a lousy time, hasn't it? I mean, not just. I mean, the 22 years is a long thing, but even in the last year, it's not been a carnival, has it?
No, not really, mate. No, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully, obviously, COVID is a touch wood passed on now, and we can get back to some normality and allow the fans in.
I hope so. That would be. I mean, Scotland, England at Wembley on a Friday night in the middle of June has got something a wee bit special about it, has it not?
Yep.
If there's no fans there, it's a different beast. It could be, you might as well play at 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, it doesn't matter, but it would be something really special. Yeah.
But sticking with football, Bill, I'm interested to find out your opinion on this matter. Obviously, it's a bit of old news now, but we just talked about COVID.
Yeah.
How do you think the SFA, Neil Doncaster and his merry men, if you like, how do you feel they handled the whole situation around COVID? Like, obviously, cutting the season there and not continuing to play it on. Do you think that was the right thing to do?
SPFL, Neil Doncaster, etc., I've kicked from one end of the street to the other for many reasons over the years. In this occasion, I don't think they handled it particularly well, but I don't think in the end they had much choice as to what they did. At the start, my thought would have been, hang on in, be brave, sit tight, foot in the ball, and when we get a chance to reopen the season, let's do it. But then when it became, my original feeling was that if our run with COVID went the same as the first run in China, Italy and Spain, then we'd probably be ready to go again in maybe 8-9 weeks. Yep. But obviously it's dragged on. Our governments haven't really had a proper plan to get us out of it. They've just had a plan to get us through it. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end, the football authorities, we didn't have the money to do what England did with Project Restart. We didn't have the billions to throw at it to make it work. Yeah. And although some clubs came out of it very unhappy, Hearts, Partick Thistle, Stranraer in particular, and then maybe like say your Falkirk and Kelty and Brora, who didn't get the chance to get promotions. Yeah. I don't really know what else you could have done with the leagues at that point. I know the Scottish Cup has kept going. My understanding is that's because it's the last year of the sponsorship and they couldn't afford to not fulfil that. So it was a really difficult situation, and I don't think anybody comes out of it very well at all.
What kind of annoyed me about the whole situation is there were still points to be won. I really felt sorry for, like you mentioned there, Kelty Hearts and Brora. I felt that in a one-off game they could have played each other at a later date and a playoff against Brecon, because Brecon dodged a bullet, didn't they?
Well, the one, the Brecon thing's the one thing in the whole breakdown in the leagues that I would have said was unjust, is that there was no reason why they should have stayed in League Two, apart from maybe the fact that their chairman was on the board and had friends and had a say in us. If you can use your influence, then great. I mean, I bet Hearts wish they had more of that kind of influence.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? Because they didn't. The Hearts found, and when they were in a tight spot, that they had kind of run out of friends and maybe burned a lot of bridges, whereas Brecon maybe had a lot of friends. But I think them staying in the league in that situation was the one thing that I thought was really poor.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I know it won't matter. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't care about Brecon City; they're the bottom of the pile," but they matter because they're 142nd of the SPFL.
Yeah, and especially like what we talked about this off air, but like the Berwick Rangers, your East Stirling, who do end up getting demoted to that lowland league.
Never come back.
No,
if you watch the likes of what happened to Gretna, it's a different thing. Gretna were an artificial club who got money thrown at them, who came up. It was never going to be real, and as soon as Brooks Milson stopped putting his money in because he was too ill, and the kids came in and said, "We're stopping this now," it just went, and they were gone in no time. They sunk without trace. Whereas I've watched Brecon City. If you take Brecon City back to when Dick Campbell went there, sort of late 90s into sort of 2000, from the bottom league, whatever it's called at the time, still third division, second division, into what's now the championship, back down again, back up again a little bit, back down, and you think they've punched so far above their weight, and yet over the last 4 or 5 years you just see them just every season just gradually, and they're on this slide. You just can't see them stopping. Berwick Rangers did the same. East Stirling were down there all the time. East Stirling were probably the club you'd have said if anybody was ever going to fall off the bottom, it was going to be East Stirling. But for Berwick and for Brecon and clubs that really mean a lot to their community, especially clubs that they're not in the central belt, or they're not in the middle of Edinburgh, or somewhere that
fan base sort of.
But somewhere where you can say, well, there's no way Albion Rovers can survive when they're only 6 miles from Parkhead or whatever it is. Yep. Brecon and Berwick clubs like have got their own little communities, and they've got their own unique thing. And Brecon will always have the hedge, and Berwick will always have the sort of speedway and all that kind of same as Cowdenbeath. They've always got a thing, and I don't think Scottish football has got enough going for it. We can afford to lose those little unique touches. Yeah.
Do you think it just comes down to money? You touched on Gretna, how Brooks Melson obviously invested quite a bit in that club, and you look at like the Cove Rangers now as well, who I'm led to believe are quite well backed.
Yeah.
Is it mainly down to money that sort of Brecon haven't kicked on Berwick, and he's still in a founder cell in that situation?
Yeah, I think they've tried to live within their means. Yeah. And it's amazing. I always believed that the clubs that would go under in Scotland weren't the ones right at the bottom of the food chain. They were the ones that were trying to achieve. So, for instance, the ones that have almost gone out of business, Dundee, Livingston, even Hearts at one point, where you're trying to do something that's not there. It's this impossible dream thing, and you're chucking money like spaghetti at the wall, seeing what's going to stick, And I never actually thought that what you would call the shoestring clubs would go out of business, because they generally live within their means. But there comes a point where when other clubs around about you are spending money, and you are still this old-fashioned kind of model, you just get left behind, You just do get left behind. Yeah,
no, you wrote a very interesting article on the 22nd of September. Scottish clubs may need to...
I was due one, to be fair. Yeah. I was due one.
No, it was a good read, mate. Scottish clubs may need to cash in their family silverware to survive. Do you think there is a chance that more clubs might have to sell their best players without fans coming in to bring in revenue?
Yeah, I have been amazed at the number of clubs who pleaded and still plead poverty, and yet who are spending vast amounts of money, Scottish terms, vast amounts of money in wages. I watched Dundee United the other week playing at St Mirren, 0-0, worst game in the world, blah blah blah. But Dundee United ended up with Lon Shankland and Mark McNulty up front, two Scotland internationalists, who, and I know that St Mirren tried to get Mark McNulty, and were told by Reading, who are putting him out on loan, that they'd have to pay maybe $5,000 a week in wages. Now, someone couldn't look at half of that just now. But if Dundee United have paid anything like that each for two strikers, at the same time as they're asking their staff to take a 20% wage cut, you've got to say, well, something's not right there. I personally thought when Anne Budge came out, right when lockdown hit and the league stopped, and she said, that's us, we're finished, we're £1 million down already. But now I'm thinking, wait a minute, you've only lost one home game at the moment. You've only got maybe 3 more home games. You're in the semi-final of the Cup, you've got that money coming, and yet you're now suddenly saying, we've got no money left. And I'm thinking, well, you can't be very well run. And then, while she's still making that argument, and how relegation will ruin us, they can pay compensation to take Robbie from Dundee United, and they can start signing Stephen Kingsley and Andy Halliday, and and you've got the boy Boyce there, and Craig Gordon who's back, and you're saying, wait a minute, which is it? At the same time, people at Hearts, people at Hibs, people at Dundee United, people at Aberdeen have been made redundant from behind the scenes, at the same time as players are coming in on... I mean, look, take away from Scotland, look at the Arsenal situation. Arsenal made something like 50 staff.
That's right.
Redundant. Now,
hospitality sector or something, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. Also, in I know you were a scout, before, right? And scouts down at Arsenal who have been there for 20, 30 years, suddenly gone. Well, sitting in the stand under his wee umbrella is Mesut Ozil on $350,000 a week, not getting a game, not even threatening to get on the bench. And I'm saying, why don't you tear up his contract, take a hit, save $350,000 a week, and keep the 50 workers who have all got mortgages, and Mesut Ozil will never have a mortgage. You know what I mean? So I don't understand the morality of keeping signing players while asking other people to make a sacrifice.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on, Bill.
Up the workers.
Absolutely spot on, mate. In the past, you've done a bit of work on BBC Radio Scotland as well, and you're now still on TalkSport, is that right?
I really enjoy going on Hawksbee and Jacobs and TalkSport. I think they're probably the two most intelligent guys on radio. Absolutely brilliant. I love getting asked on there. Jim White as well, do a bit of stuff with him. I used to do quite a lot of stuff with the BBC, and did a bit of commentary, did a bit of presenting and stuff, which was good fun. And then that kind of stopped.
Do you enjoy that as much as writing the columns and the newspaper work? Or
I always, when I was a wee boy, although I wanted to write in a newspaper, I always wanted to be a football commentator.
Right.
I always wanted to be a commentator. And I had a go at it, so I can say I've done it, but I had a season, and again, I shut down the Clydebank Press. I think I helped to shut down Setanta, because when they were doing it, I was commentating. I was doing a bit of commentary for them, doing the kind of, the highlights roundup.
Yes,
So you'd go to a game and you'd record it and they'd cut it down to kind of 3 minutes, that kind of thing. So they shut. I can name you quite a few actually that I've managed to, when I think about this, I'm been a bit of a jinx.
You're not going to jinx my podcast now, are you?
It's been good. MDs want to hire somebody that, if you want to demolish your company, I'm the man.
Give you a shout, mate. So we've talked about, obviously, your columns in the newspaper, being on radio. You've got quite a few strings to your bow, if you like, Bill. You're also an author. You wrote your first book in 1999, Penthouse and Pavements. Yeah,
Penthouse and Pavements was great fun to do. I remember reading Nick Hornby's Fever Pitch, which was said to be the book that relaunched football as the kind of the thing for lads, and it was meant to be the thing that inspired all the kind of lad mags that then came out and all the fantasy football on TV, and which then spawned so many podcasts and videocasts and all that stuff. So Fever Pitch was meant to be the thing, but I was so angry at that book because he was meant to be the biggest Arsenal fan in the world, and then he went to university and decided he was going to follow Cambridge, and it just blew my mind that somebody could have two teams. But then as I looked around and I spoke to people, more and more people, you would say, so where are you from, mate? I'm from Ayr. So you follow Ayr? Aye, I follow Ayr. I'm kind of Rangers man, but, or somebody would say, I'm Albion Rovers, but Celtic man, And I said, am I the only guy in the world that
one team
only supports his, and not helped by the fact that being a St Mirren fan and living in the West of Scotland, nobody who supports Rangers and Celtic believes that you support who you support, because they all believe that you support the one that they don't support.
Right.
Because when you start writing about it, they see things with the one eye, and they all think that you're one of them. You say you support something, blah blah blah. So that kind of got me to write that book, and it's a book that kind of started out being written about feeling that way about your own team when other people don't believe you support your own team, and some people have two teams when they shouldn't have two teams, and it grew into so many more things. And one of the best things about that was I wanted to go behind the scenes at a football club for a wee while, and I got in touch with John McVeigh, who's the Airdrie manager and various, at that time he was a coach at Dunfermline. Right. I spoke to him and said, any chance I could get into? So anyway, he spoke to Bert Payton, who was the manager. Bert Payton was the manager, Dick Campbell was his number two, John McVeigh, lovely quiet threesome running that club. Card games and Ludo at nights, and they invited me in to come and train with them for a fortnight. So I went and trained with the first team and was in the dressing room for team talks before a reserve game, and then before the next league, first team game, and that gave me a great insight. So that gave me a brilliant chapter as well, and the book just kind of grew arms and legs, and people still buy it. It's a 20 years on, which is great.
Oh wow! So there's been 8 books in total. We'll talk about your latest book very shortly. Other ones involving football, obviously. Big Brother, the Derrick Ferguson story. Yeah, was that like a sort of autobiography of his life?
That was Derrick wanted to bring out a book of his life, and he came and approached me and asked would I help him with it, and it was fascinating because Derrick's just a lovely guy. Yeah. And a really underrated player these days. Of course, he's overshadowed now by Barry.
Say that, yeah.
And that's why we called it Big Brother. So the picture on the cover is him with a young Barry on his shoulders at Ibrox. And Derrick is an awful lot of stuff in his life, some tragic stuff and some stuff where he's let himself down, he says himself. And it was one of these stories that was a lot more than a football story, and I really enjoyed it. The other bit of ghostwriting I did was with a friend of mine, Des McEwen. Des at the time was playing at Queen of the South, and he wanted to do a book about, because he said, I'm reading all these books about Tony Adams and John Barnes and Henrik Larsson and whatever else, and nobody ever thinks about the crap footballers. So we did this book called Don't Give Up the Day Job, which was basically his diary of a season going between, he was a stationery salesman, so he was going around offices selling paper and pencils and paper clips, and then he was driving down to Dumfries 3 times a week and playing for Queen of the South, and it was great because that got you into all the characters in his dressing room, and that was really good fun to do as well. was a really good book to do.
Brilliant. And all are still available on Amazon and all good bookshops, so go out and get a copy of these sound.
Do you know what? I went at a gap where I wasn't writing stuff. I wrote a novel called Charlie Spuds about 2003, 2004, and it was all right. It went okay, but novels are really hard to write, and I read back on it now and I think, I would do that really differently. So, but I'm glad I did it. Did a book when Love Street was getting knocked down. Did a book called Endless Love, which I quite enjoyed doing. Then took a wee gap, and in the last sort of 4 years, I've written 3 more. So I wrote one called The 6 Inches in Front of Your Face, which is about, it actually starts at that memorial, in the 9/11 memorial in 2011. It's about mental health.
Right.
Because I kind of at that time hit a bit of a brick wall and went and got treatment for depression and just was a bit kind of all over the shop. But I used physical exercise because also at the time, you might not believe this, anybody watching this just now, but back then I wasn't this athlete that you see now. I had piled weight on and I just felt rubbish. Yep. And so I started using physical exercise as a way of trying to sort out my mental health. So over the course of a few years, Des McKeown, who I mentioned, Des and I started up a fundraising thing for a group from Macmillan Cancer. Right. And we started doing big events. So we started with the New York Marathon, and then we started doing London marathons, and then we've done things like we cycled across Vietnam and Cambodia. Last year we cycled across the Pyrenees. Wow. I did a thing with after Phil O'Donnell passed away. Right. Some of his colleagues and friends, Simon Donnelly, Jackie McNamara, Darren Jackson, a few other ones, we went and climbed some volcanoes in Ecuador and got to the top of Mount Cotopaxi on the day Motherwell and Celtic were playing each other in the Scottish Cup final, which was pretty cool. So a lot of stuff, did the Great Wall of China stuff, so it was all stuff to cope with, and then I put it together into this book, which is, I think a lot of people have found quite helpful, because a lot of guys don't want to talk about this. Yeah, I know you've had Libby Emerson on the show before, who's terrific in terms of mental health issues and raising awareness. But I've found since I started mentioning these things in the paper and writing about it in the book, that a lot of guys come forward and say, I don't think of myself as being, I just got a guy doing a job, but guys will say, well, you're a kind of well-known guy and you're saying that you've got this thing. Does that mean it's okay for me to say I've got this? Of course it is. So that's, for me, that's a lot more helpful to the world than
absolutely
criticising footballers.
If you can use any sort of platform to discuss it, and if it affects one person,
anybody can go to the new camp and give Lionel Messi 4 out of 10, as I've done, right? But to actually write about something that people come back and say that changed things for me and that really helped me, and can you tell me more, and can I go tell me where to go, and that's really cool. So that then changed me in a big direction. So
because you've recently qualified as a mental health therapist, haven't you, Bill?
I have.
Is that obviously why you led on to that line?
I'm fascinated by the mind, and I'm fascinated by what caused my issues. And I always thought that my issues were an illness that needed tablets to sort them out, and then maybe some physical exercise to, I'm saying to myself, well, depression is just a lack of serotonin in the brain, your sunshine vitamin getting to your head, and as soon as the tablets sort that out, and then you go for a wee jog, everything will be okay. But it's just over the years I've kind of realised that you don't have it. You don't have depression. It's not a thing. Mm-hmm. You experience it, and I've come to kind of work out that if you can experience something, you can unexperience it. So I went and studied and did a qualification in a thing called Neuro-Linguistic Programming Nlp, which basically takes the thoughts and the pictures and the images that you create in your head and turns them round to solve what you think are problems. So whether it's a phobia or a bad habit, or it's a terrible fear of flying, or a trauma in your past, or you can't sleep, it's all a thought. It's not real. It's all just a thought. So I really got fascinated by this stuff, and I wanted to go, and so I've just started to get into practice with that. And actually try to help people with their issues.
Absolutely superb, mate.
Which is cool.
Obviously, like we mentioned earlier, this year's been a bit of a stinker of a year, hasn't it? This probably hasn't helped a lot of people's mental health.
It's not. People's sleep patterns are all over the place. I think people's sense of isolation It's quite heavy. People are feeling quite claustrophobic. For instance, if somebody lives on their own, normally they like living their own because they know they can go out and they can go back and be at peace with themselves. They know where they are and it's their house and nobody messes it up. But then if you're told you have to be on your own, that's a completely different, and a lot of people are getting. And then the other side of it, people who live busy lives and the wife goes out to work, the guy goes out to work, the kids go to school, blah, 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 and then suddenly they're in the house together as they were for 3 months there, whatever, 3-4 months, 24/7.
Yep.
And that's been really hard. So it's unfortunately, these issues are something that are never going to get out of fashion.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that you used lockdown for is you wrote a new book, didn't you? You wrote We Know Nothing, about the 199 first days of lockdown.
I did.
What inspired you to write that?
Well, when Boris Johnson on the Monday night, 23rd of March, said, "You're in lockdown, people," I went, "This is going to be a long haul. I'm going to start writing some stuff." That's what I do to fill my time in. So, because usually I would go out on my bike or I'd be doing something. That's the other thing I do. I teach spin.
All right.
Indoor cycling stuff. But
You're a busy man, Bill.
So
You're a busy man.
So that was off. That was off suddenly. So you couldn't go anywhere. So I started writing this book. And the title, We Know Nothing, came from this brilliant interview I saw with Sir Anthony Hopkins, who did, I don't know if you've seen, you should see the film called The Two Popes, where he plays the old Pope, Ratzinger, and it's when Bergoglio, who's now Pope Francis, who's played by Jonathan Pryce, and because of all the shenanigans that were going on in the Catholic Church, all this stuff, and Bergoglio came and said, "I don't know if I want to be head of this church that can't deal with all this stuff." So basically it's all about the old Pope trying to convince the new Pope that it's the right thing to do, blah, blah, blah. But he gives this brilliant interview where this really young sort of very serious interviewer on the BBC World Channel saying to him, "But I've read before that you're not a religious man, but you're playing the Pope. How does that?" He said, "Well, I'm an actor, I do, guy gives me a script to play it." But he said this thing during the interview where the guy said, you've achieved so much and you've won Oscars and you've Hannibal Lecter and you've this and you've that and Winston Churchill, you played all the things, and you must have a brain the size of whatever. And he said, "I know nothing." He says, "I grew up, my dad said I was never going to come to anything. And I thought, you're probably right. I've been out and did things, and I've now realised at the age of 82 that I have done loads of things, but I know nothing. I don't know how my body works. I don't know what makes me stand up. I don't know how I'm able to pick this cup up. I don't." And I thought, we think I mean, look at, you're in the studio, you've got all the cameras and you've got all the equipment. Somebody's been clever enough to make all this stuff and make it work so we can do this cast. But at the same time, this tiny wee thing comes from somewhere in China, comes out of a fish market and invades the world, and we don't know a thing about how to, so we can't stop it. Yep. And I just thought, we genuinely, for all that we're a really clever, inventive race, sometimes we're just hopeless. And I wanted to see what happened over the period of lockdown, which I thought was going to be probably a 3-month or something lockdown. I thought, well, 3 months book, right, out. And of course, it's still going on and will be going on for some time and at various levels. And following this global reaction to coronavirus just made me realise how little people know. Yeah. I mean, when you see somebody walking along the street with a mask with their nose hanging out of it, and you think,
pointless.
I mean, it's like having a pair of swimming trunks with a wedding tackle flopping over it. Well, why you wouldn't do it? You know what I mean? So so the book just grew like that. So
does We Know Nothing? Is that available now? Is it out?
It's on Amazon. I think on Amazon there's that one. The one before, which I wrote after being at the World Cup in 2018, which is called Var and Peace.
Oh, wow.
Which was a title that came to me, and I thought, I'll write a book about that. So,
what's your view on VAR? Because there's been
I hated it then and I hate it now.
Yep.
There's a lot of room for, I think, goal line technology, brilliant, right? It's been needed. I mean, we've argued for 50 odd years now with Jeff Hurst, right? Yeah. So that would have sorted that out. Yep. It would have still have been 2 each. Germany would have scored, they'd have won 3-2. There you go. But VAR has created so many problems.
Is it the way the English Premiership's maybe handled it? When you look at other countries like Germany and Australia, I think, who are actually got interaction with the referee, just basically say, I need to know that 10 seconds ago, was there a foul, yes or no?
Yeah, this business where, I mean, the ridiculous one the other week was Patrick Bamford.
Where he pointed to be offside.
I'm onside, and he points to stick it in there, which is what you do. But he's onside. Everything about him is onside. You know, even Donald Trump was watching and saying he's onside a lot, right? And he's called offside. Then the other one, Arsenal, Aston Villa, first minute of the game, ball comes to be John McGinn, smashes it in the net. Barkley is kind of in line with the goalkeeper, but he's jumped in the air to let the ball go past him. It takes 4 minutes. Now, if it takes 4 minutes, they can't be sure. That's where I think VAR's just been, and yet at the same time, it's not allowed to come in for diving, foul throws. You know, is it a corner? And I don't know about you, the one that annoys me, since they've been allowed to, the guys that put the ball down for the corner, but it's just outside the quadrant. I say, well, why do we have... So VAR should going to tell him to put that ball back in the quadrant, right? No, so VAR should be there to get things right.
It should help the referee, shouldn't it?
And rather than making the referee look stupid. I mean, the Virgil van Dijk one with Jordan Pickford, the fact that, I know the guy's out for the season because the goalkeeper's just cemented him through the kneecap, but he was offside, so therefore it's not a decision. So it doesn't matter what order.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't matter what order the thing's happening. You say he was offside, but he's on the park. The ball's there. He doesn't know he's offside, and he's put the guy out for the season with both feet. So common sense tells you that's a red card.
Absolutely. Mate.
So if they're not going to use it properly, they're as well putting it away.
And is this why we're in maybe a lucky situation in the Scottish football scene that we can't afford VAR? So in a way, it's good that it's not part of our football scene. Can
you imagine VAR at an Old Firm game or a Hearts Hibs game or something?
But that's it. The referees would get stick for it, and it's they've not asked for this. This has made their life a whole lot harder, hasn't it?
Yeah, and the referees who are in the VAR office are almost going, great, I can make decisions here that are not my fault. Yep. So if he says, I'm going to say that's and the referee goes, you can see referees sometimes going, really? Have I got, oh, right. It's some of the handball ones where guys have got their hands round here and it touches their pinky. Yep. And they go, yeah, well, under the rules now, that's you think, well, it's not a penalty. There's no way that's... The other one that's happening now all the time is players go to kick the ball, the defender comes in to challenge them, their feet collide, and because the defender's made the challenge, it's a penalty kick, and it's not a penalty. Because there's no intent, there's no foul, you know, nothing. The game doesn't change. You've not set out to stop them doing anything. So I think unless they're going to do it right, they should just... Do
you think we'll see this getting withdrawn from the English leagues?
No, I think they're probably far too far down. They'll just keep tweaking and messing about with it. And I think they're too stubborn to...
admit they were wrong.
Because
we implemented the goal line technology for the semi-finals recently, didn't we, the Hearts Hibs game? Is that as far as you think we'll go in Scotland?
Well,
like I say, is it going to come down to money before we implement
I think it does come down. I mean, we just can't have VAR. Mm-hmm. You may have somebody running on the park and drawing those a yellow line, a blue line, and getting a maths teacher with a set square to try and work it out.
Trigonometry set,
that stuff, but we use plastic sets. But no, I don't see... I mean, but that's the other thing, we're paying 2 extra referees to stand behind the goals at semi-finals, and neither of them could see that neither of those penalties were penalties.
Yeah, exactly.
So you think, well, what's the... I mean, everybody can see that neither of those penalties are penalties. Yeah. Nobody's deliberately conned them. They're just not penalties. And yet, the 2 guys behind the goals go... So I don't get it.
To go back to the point, Bill, so what was the name of that book, sorry, that you wrote on VAR?
VAR in Peace.
VAR in Peace. Brilliant.
VAR in Peace is on there, and then the one before that, 6 inches in front of your face, that's on, they're all on Amazon. Penthouse and Pavement's on there, Endless Love's on there, Dez's book, Derrick's book. They're all
brilliant.
They're all there.
Have you got any future plans for any other books?
I try and write one every year. I don't know what the next one is. It might still be about lockdown, maybe lockdown 2. This time it's serious. I don't know.
Just one last question. Obviously, we're going to Euros in 2021.
Yeah.
You looking forward to that?
Yes. Last year's Euros next year. That's pretty
mental.
Deep,
that sums up this year, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be great.
It will be. Yeah.
It's going to be. I mean, just as I say, I'm so happy for going to sound like the 300-year-old man here. It's going to sound like Joe Biden's dad, but for the young people to be going to like my son's in his 30s, and you know, he sent me a Bob my is it when we beat Serbia 2 minutes after the final whistle. He sent me a picture of me and him from 1998.
The France.
I was about to head off to the finals, and he had his Scotland strip on, and I had my Scotland strip. I was away to work at the finals, and we got a picture taken, and I just went, wow, that was him. He was a guy with wee curtains, haircut and all that, and 12-year-old, and you think, you know, and you think, wow, that's
a long time ago.
That's a long, long time ago. So for that generation, right up to people in their 30s, when you think about it, it's not even just kids.
Yep.
You know, guys that work with me, the sports writers who have turned 40, they're in their 40s, and thought that it would just be forever. And a few of us are lucky that we still get sent to finals, mainly because if we didn't, then our paper would need to take all the English reporter's copy, and it's just a nightmare. So the fact that we still get to go is fantastic, but to get to go with Scotland is incredible.
It's just the hope, obviously, I think we touched on it earlier, that the fans can go. Yeah. We're hoping that this vaccine that they keep promising us is going to come into play, and we can all enjoy the...
Absolutely. The interesting thing as well is at Hampden, we've got this image in our head about the two games in Hampden of 50,000 Scotland fans, but it's not going to be. No. Because the UEFA, we've seen this enough over the years that we might end up getting the tickets one way or another, but we won't start out with the tickets. You know, we might get 15,000 maybe, but it won't be queue up and buy a ticket to go to Hampden. So I think a lot of people are going to end up quite disappointed, unfortunately.
Bill, I've loved having you on the show this week, ladies and
I've
gentlemen.
loved it. It's been great fun.
Bill Leckie.
Cheers.